The massive crystal structure floated in the darkness of space, spinning slowly around the bright neutron star called Kara 7. Inside the Galactic Council chambers, beings from hundreds of different worlds gathered to discuss the most important matters in the galaxy. The air hummed with translation devices working hard to turn alien languages into something everyone could understand. Admiral Minho sat in the human section, his dark uniform standing out among the colorful robes and natural skin patterns of the other delegates. He had traveled far from Earth to attend this emergency meeting, though he still did not know why the Council had called it. The message had been marked as urgent, but the Council was always dramatic about these things. Ambassador Yuna stepped forward to the center of the Great Hall. She was tall and graceful, with silver hair that marked her as one of the ethereal race. Her people had been part of the galaxy for over 10,000 years, and they remembered things that other species had forgotten. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of ancient knowledge. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," Yuna began, her words echoing through the chamber. "We gather today because some among us have forgotten the old warnings. There are rules that exist not because we made them, but because we learned them through great cost." Minho leaned forward in his seat. He had a bad feeling about where this was going. "The rule is simple," Yuna continued. "Never interfere with Earth's military vessels. Never attack them. Never capture them. Never attempt to board them or steal their technology. The price of such actions is not defeat. It is not surrender. It is complete annihilation." A low murmur ran through the assembly. Many of the newer species laughed quietly among themselves. Humans had only joined the galaxy 50 years ago, and many still saw them as newcomers who talked, too big for their actual power. Minho stood up slowly. "Ambassador Yuna, why are you telling us this now? Has someone threatened human ships?" Yuna's ancient eyes met his, and Minho saw something there that made his blood run cold. Fear. Pure, ancient fear. "Admiral Minho," she said softly, 3 days ago, we received intelligence that the Thrakari Empire is planning to attack and capture human vessels. They believe your technology will help them win their war against the Zephyrian horde. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted questions and arguments in dozens of languages. The Thrakari had been fighting the insectoid Zephyrians for almost 2 years now, and everyone knew they were losing badly. Their homeworlds were burning, and their people were dying by the millions. From the reptilian section of the chamber, War Commander Velthar rose to his feet. His scales were scarred from battle, and his eyes burned with desperate fury. "My people face extinction," he roared, his voice cutting through the noise. "The Zephyrians show no mercy. They turn our children into food for their young. If human technology can save my people, then I will take it." Minho turned to face the Thrakari commander. "Velthar, I understand your desperation. But attacking human ships will not save your people. It will destroy them faster than any enemy ever could." Empty threats from a young species. Velthar snarled. "Humans have been in space for barely 100 years. What could you possibly do to us that the Zephyrians have not already tried?" Yuna stepped between them, her voice carrying a tone that made the entire chamber fall silent. "War Commander, you do not understand. The warning about Earth's fleet is not new. It has existed for over 1,000 years, since before humans even knew other species existed." The chamber went completely quiet. Even the translation devices seemed to pause. "That is impossible," whispered a delegate from the Silicon Consortium. Humans only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. No, Yuna said, her voice heavy with ancient sadness. Humans achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago for the second time. They had it before, long ago, during the Silence Wars, the wars that nearly destroyed this entire galaxy, the wars that we do not speak of, because the few survivors agreed never to speak of them. Minho felt the room spinning around him. This was not possible. Human history was well documented. They had never had advanced technology before the recent breakthrough. His own government had told him this. "You are lying," Velthar said, but his voice had lost its angry edge. Now he sounded uncertain. Yuna turned to a control panel and activated a holographic display. Ancient star charts appeared in the air, showing galaxy maps from over a millennium ago. Entire sectors were marked in red, with symbols that meant uninhabitable and forbidden zone. These are the regions where the Silence Wars were fought, Yuna explained. During that time, there was a species that could make ships travel between dimensions. They could build weapons that did not just destroy matter, but removed it from existence entirely. They could make entire star systems forget they had ever existed. The hologram zoomed in on a small yellow star near the edge of the galaxy. Earth's star. The survivors of those wars made an agreement, Yuna continued. That species would hide their true nature and pretend to be primitive. They would patrol the galaxy quietly, keeping the peace without revealing their power. In exchange, the rest of us would leave them alone. We would never attack their ships, never try to steal their technology, never force them to reveal what they truly are. Minho stared at the hologram, his mind racing. None of this made sense. If humans had such advanced technology, why hide it? Why pretend to be weak? Because, Yuna said, as if reading his thoughts, the cost of that technology was too high. The species that fought in the Silence Wars learned that some weapons are too dangerous to use. Some knowledge is too terrible to remember. They chose to forget, to become simple again, to live peaceful lives. But they kept the weapons hidden away, just in case. Velthar's claws scraped against the metal floor as he shifted nervously. Even if this is true, my people are dying now. I cannot let them die because of some ancient agreement I never signed. Then you doom them to something worse than death, Yuna said sadly. You doom them to never having existed at all. Admiral. Minho stood up again, his face pale but determined. Commander Velthar, I give you my word as a human officer. If you need help against the Zephyrians, we will find another way. But do not attack our ships. Please. Velthar looked around the chamber, seeing the fear in every alien face. Even the proud and warlike species were silent. Finally he spoke. I will consider your words, he said. But Minho could see in his eyes that the war commander had already made his choice. Desperation had driven him beyond reason. As the council session ended and delegates began to leave, Yuna approached Minho privately. Admiral, she said quietly, you should return to Earth immediately. Contact your highest authorities. Tell them that the old agreements may be breaking down. What will happen if they are? Minho asked. Yuna looked out at the stars through the crystal walls of the chamber. The galaxy will remember why some species choose to forget their own power, and we will all pray that this time someone survives to learn from it. 3 weeks had passed since the council meeting, and War Commander Velthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Crusher. Through the viewing windows, he could see the twisted metal remains of what had once been the beautiful garden, world of Thrakmor. The Zephyrians had been thorough in their destruction. Nothing lived there now except the metallic insects that the enemy used to strip planets of all useful materials. His communication officer, a young female named Kirith, approached with another report. "Commander, we have lost contact with the defense fleet at Veldana. Long-range sensors show Zephyrian bioships moving toward our last 3 colony worlds." Velthar's claws dug into the metal railing. In 6 months, maybe less, his entire species would be extinct. The Zephyrians did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next. "Target, sir," called his strategic advisor, an old soldier named Grakvon. "The human patrol ship will pass through the Andromeda Bridge in 2 days. Our spies confirm it will be alone, conducting a routine border patrol." Velthar turned to face his advisor. The Andromeda Bridge was a natural hyperspace junction that connected several star systems. Ships had to slow down there to navigate safely through the twisted space-time currents. It was the perfect place for an ambush. "How many ships do we have available?" Velthar asked. 47 war vessels, including our 3 heavy cruisers," Grakvon replied. "More than enough to overwhelm a single human destroyer." Velthar closed his eyes and thought of his mate and children, who had died when the Zephyrians glassed the capital world. He thought of the millions of Thrakari refugees crowded into the few remaining safe zones, waiting for a salvation that would never come through conventional means. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "We will take the human ship and learn their secrets. It is our only chance." Grakvon hesitated. "Sir, the warnings from the Council. The Council speaks of ancient myths while my people die." Velthar roared. "I will not let my species become extinct because of ghost stories told by cowards." 2 days later, the Earth destroyer EFS Indomitable dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Andromeda Bridge. Captain Jiwan sat in her command chair, reviewing the routine patrol reports from the Outer Rim territories. Her ship was small, compared to some of the massive alien warships she had seen, but it was fast and well armed for its size. "Captain," called her tactical officer Dong Hyun from his station. "I'm reading multiple contacts approaching from the asteroid field. Configuration matches Thrakari war vessels." Jiwan frowned. Thrakari ships had no business in this sector. Their territory was on the other side of the galaxy, and they were supposed to be fighting the Zephyrians. "How many ships?" she asked. 47 confirmed contacts, ma'am. They're moving to surround us." Engineer Sora looked up from her console. "Captain, their approach pattern is clearly hostile. They're not here for a friendly chat." Jiwan stood up and walked to the main view screen. She could see the Thrakari ships moving into attack formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. In the center of the formation was a massive battle cruiser that had to be the flagship. "Open a communication channel," she ordered. The main screen flickered, and the scarred face of War Commander Velthar appeared. His eyes burned with desperate determination. "Human vessel," Velthar said. "I am War Commander Velthar of the Thrakari Empire. Surrender your ship immediately and you will not be harmed." Jiwan stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back. "Commander Velthar, I am Captain Jiwan of the Earth Destroyer Indomitable. You are threatening a vessel under Earth protection in neutral space. Withdraw your forces immediately." "I cannot do that," Velthar replied. "My people face extinction. Your technology is our only hope for survival. Surrender your ship, and I will ensure your crew is treated well." "Commander," Jiwan said carefully, "you don't understand what you're doing. There are agreements in place. Ancient agreements. If you attack this ship, the consequences will be far worse than anything the Zephyrians could do to your people." Velthar's expression hardened. More threats and myths. I have heard enough lies from the Council. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Ji-won looked around her bridge at her crew. Dong-yun was running tactical scans, trying to find a way out of the trap. Sora was working frantically at her engineering console. They were good people, and they deserved better than to die because of an alien commander's desperation. Tactical, she said quietly. Send a priority message to Earth Command. Full emergency protocols. Include our position and the current situation. Message sent, Captain. Dong-yun confirmed. Engineering. How long until our backup systems are ready? Sora's fingers flew over her controls. 15 minutes for basic defensive measures, Captain. But against this many ships... I know, Ji-won said. She turned back to the screen. Commander Velthar, I'm going to give you one last chance. Take your fleet and leave. Please, for the sake of your people, leave now. I'm sorry, Captain, Velthar said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. Begin the attack. The Thrakari fleet opened fire all at once. Energy beams and missile salvos filled the space around the Indomitable. The human ship's shields flared and sparked under the massive assault. Ji-won was thrown from her feet as the ship shook violently. Shields down to 30%, Sora called out over the noise of alarms and explosions. Return fire, Ji-won ordered, pulling herself back into her command chair. The Indomitable fought back, her weapons lashing out at the closest Thrakari ships. 2 enemy vessels exploded in brilliant flashes of light, but there were too many others. The human ship was tough, but it was not built to fight an entire fleet alone. Hull breach on Deck 7, Dong-hyun reported. Emergency force fields are holding, but we can't take much more of this. Ji-won watched the tactical display as more and more red warnings appeared. Her ship was dying, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The Thrakari had planned this ambush well. Captain, Sora said, her voice strangely calm. The message got through. Earth Command acknowledges our situation. Good, Ji-won replied. At least someone will know what happened here. The Indomitable shuddered as another massive explosion rocked the ship. The lights flickered, and several consoles sparked and went dark. Through the smoke and chaos, Ji-won could see Thrakari boarding pods attaching to her hull. They're coming. Aboard, Dong-yun said. Security teams are responding, but... I know, Ji-won said. She stood up and straightened her uniform. All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for capture. Follow the code of conduct for prisoners of war. Help is coming. 20 minutes later, Thrakari soldiers had secured the bridge. War Commander Velthar himself came aboard to accept the surrender. He looked around at the human crew with something that might have been respect. You fought well, Captain, he said to Ji-won. Better than I expected from such a small ship. Ji-won met his gaze steadily. Commander, you have no idea what you've just done. When my people come for us, they won't be interested in your reasons or your justifications. They won't care that your species is dying. Then perhaps your people are not as civilized as they claim, Velthar replied. Ji-won almost smiled. Commander, civilization is a luxury that only peaceful species can afford, and we stopped being a peaceful species a very long time ago. We just forgot about it for a while. Something in her tone made Velthar uncomfortable, but he pushed the feeling aside. He had the human ship, he had their technology. Soon, his people would have the weapons they needed to fight back against the Zephyrians. He had no way of knowing that deep in the hidden bases beneath Earth's moon, ancient systems were already waking up. Systems that had slept for 1,000. Years were beginning to remember their purpose. And across human space, Ships that existed between dimensions were starting to move toward the coordinates where the Indomitable had died. The galaxy was about to remember why some rules should never be broken. Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, in chambers that did not appear on any official map, something ancient began to stir. The emergency signal from the EFS Indomitable had traveled faster than light itself, carried by methods that modern, human science claimed were impossible. As the signal reached its destination, machines that had waited in silence for over 1,000 years began to wake up. Director Hyun-woo stood in the center of the Luna Base Command Center, watching displays that showed readings he had never seen before. He was a tall man with graying hair and tired eyes, the kind of person who had spent too many years keeping secrets that weighed heavily on his mind. Around him, technicians scrambled to understand what was happening as their instruments detected energy patterns that should not exist. "Sir," called his assistant, a young woman named Minji, "the deep sensors are showing massive power buildup in sectors 7 through 15. Those areas have been sealed for decades." Hyun-woo closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He had hoped this day would never come. His grandfather had told him stories about the old days, back when Earth's true nature was known throughout the galaxy. Stories about weapons that could unmake reality itself, and the terrible price that came with using them. "Begin Protocol 7, he said quietly. Minji stared at him in shock. "Sir, Protocol 7 hasn't been activated since the Silence Wars ended," Hyun-woo finished. "I know. Do it anyway." Across the solar system, Admiral Minho's ship was rushing back toward Earth at maximum speed. He had left the Galactic Council as soon as he received word about the attack on the Indomitable. Now, as he sat in his cabin reviewing classified files that he had never been allowed to see before, he began to understand why Ambassador Yuna had looked so frightened. The files told a story that was not in any history book. They spoke of a time when humanity had possessed technology that made them the most feared species in the galaxy. Ships that could travel through dimensions, weapons that could erase entire star systems from existence, soldiers who had been changed by their technology until they were no longer entirely human. But the files also told of the terrible cost, the psychological damage that came from wielding such power, the gradual loss of humanity that occurred when people became gods of destruction, the final decision to hide it all away and pretend to be a simple, peaceful species. "Admiral," his communication officer interrupted his reading. "We're receiving a priority message from Earth Command. Fleet Commander Yunbi requests your immediate presence at Luna Base." Minho had never heard of Fleet Commander Yunbi, which was strange because he thought he knew all the high-ranking officers in Earth's military. As his ship approached the moon, he was directed to a landing bay that did not appear on any charts he had ever seen. The underground base was enormous, stretching for kilometers in all directions. As Minho walked through corridors lined with humming machinery, he passed things that made his military mind struggle to understand what he was seeing. Soldiers in armor that seemed to bend light around it. Weapons that looked more like works of art than instruments of war. Ships that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in too many dimensions at once. Fleet Commander Yunbi was waiting for him in a chamber that overlooked a massive construction bay. She was a small woman with silver streaks in her black hair and eyes that seemed much older than her face. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority that made Admiral Minho feel like a junior officer again. "Admiral Minho," she said, "I suppose you're wondering why you've never heard of me before." "The thought had crossed my mind," Minho replied. "I command the Gray Fleet," Yunbi explained. Ships and crews that officially don't exist. We've been waiting here for over 50 years, hoping we would never be needed again." She gestured toward the construction bay, where Minho could see vessels unlike anything in the regular Earth fleet. They seemed to shift and change as he watched them, as if they were not entirely solid. "These ships were built using technology from before the Great Forgetting," Yunbi continued. "They exist partially outside normal space-time. They can travel between dimensions, ignore most conventional weapons, and carry armaments that can do things I hope you never have to see." Meanwhile, aboard the captured Indomitable, Captain Jiwan sat in the ship's brig with her crew. The Thrakari had been relatively polite captors, but they were clearly excited about the opportunity to study human technology. Through the small window in her cell, Jiwan could see Thrakari engineers working frantically to access the ship's computer systems. "Captain," Tactical Officer Dong Yun whispered from the cell next to hers, "they're trying to break into the main computer. How long before they succeed?" Jiwan smiled grimly. "They won't succeed. Earth technology has built-in protections against unauthorized access. But even if they could break through, it wouldn't matter." "Why not?" asked Engineer Sora from across the corridor. "Because," Jiwan said, "our ship wasn't just sending a distress signal. It was sending a very specific type of message, the kind that activates protocols that have been sleeping for a very long time. War Commander Velthar was indeed trying to access the human ship's technology, but he was growing frustrated with the lack of progress. Every time his engineers thought they had found a way into the computer systems, new defenses appeared. It was as if the ship was actively fighting back against their efforts." "Commander," his chief engineer reported, "the human systems are unlike anything we've seen before. They seem to be based on principles that our science doesn't recognize." "Keep trying," Velthar ordered. "My people are dying while we waste time here." What Velthar did not know was that back on Earth, ancient manufacturing systems were beginning to operate for the first time in decades. Deep in hidden facilities around the planet, machines were building ships and weapons using blueprints that had been locked away since the end of the Silence Wars. Director Hyunwoo stood in the main command center watching as reports came in from facilities he had almost forgotten existed. Secret bases on Mars were activating their dormant reactors. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt were beginning construction of vessels that had no names in any human language. "Sir," Minji called from her station, "we're receiving confirmation signals from all Gray Fleet bases. Total available forces. Sir, I can't believe these numbers." "How many ships?" Hyunwoo asked. 17,000 vessels of various classes," Minji replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Including the Silence-class dreadnoughts." Hyunwoo felt a chill run down his spine. The Silence-class ships were legends, even among those who knew the truth about Earth's hidden capabilities. They were weapons of such devastating power that using them required approval from the highest levels of government. Ships that could not just destroy planets, but remove them from existence entirely. Back on Luna Base, Fleet Commander Yunbi was explaining the situation to Admiral Minho. "The Thrakari have violated the most fundamental law of galactic civilization," she said. "They have attacked an Earth fleet vessel and taken prisoners. According to the ancient agreements, this requires a response that demonstrates why the law exists in the first place." "What kind of response?" Minho asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. "Complete elimination of the Thrakari military capability," Yunbi replied matter-of-factly. "Not destruction, elimination. They will cease to exist as a military force." "That seems Extreme, Minho said carefully. Yunbi turned to look at him, and in her eyes, Minho saw something that made him understand why some humans had chosen to forget their own power. "Admiral," she said softly, "you're thinking like someone who believes in proportional response. But the Gray Fleet doesn't operate on those principles. We operate on the principle that some lines should never be crossed. And when they are crossed, the response must be so overwhelming that no one will ever consider crossing them again." She walked to a control panel and activated a display showing the current location of the captured Indomitable. "The Thrakari wanted to see what human technology could do," she said. "In 6 hours, they're going to get their wish. And when we're finished, the galaxy will remember why some species choose to forget their own strength." In her cell aboard, the Indomitable, Captain Ji-Wan, was quietly counting down the hours. She knew how long it took for the Gray Fleet to mobilize once the ancient protocols were activated. Her crew didn't know the full truth about Earth's military capabilities, but they trusted her when she told them that rescue was coming. What none of them knew was that this rescue would be unlike anything the galaxy had seen for over 1,000 years. The ships that were coming for them existed partially outside normal reality. They carried weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics, and they were crewed by people who had been trained to use power that could break the universe itself. The Thrakari thought they had captured a single human ship. They had no idea that they had just triggered the awakening of humanity's true military force, a force that had ended the last galactic war by making entire enemy fleets simply cease to exist. Soon, War Commander Velthar would learn why the ancient warnings had been taken so seriously by every species in the galaxy, and the Thrakari Empire would discover that some prices are too high to pay, even for survival itself. The Thrakari fleet hung in space around the captured human destroyer like predators surrounding wounded prey. War Commander Velthar stood on his bridge, watching his engineers work frantically to unlock the secrets of human technology. For 2 days, they had made no progress, but he refused to give up. His people's survival depended on what they could learn from this single ship. "Commander," his sensor operator called out, "we have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace, long range. Sensors indicate human vessels approaching." Velthar turned to his tactical display. 12 ships had appeared at the edge of the system, moving toward his position at a steady pace. They looked like standard human vessels, smaller than his own ships, but well armed for their size. "How long until they reach us?" he asked. "And now, current speed, approximately 4 hours, sir." Velthar allowed himself a small smile. 12 ships against his fleet of 47. The humans were either very confident or very foolish. Either way, he would soon have more human technology to study. Aboard the lead human vessel, the EFS Retribution, Admiral Minho stood beside Fleet Commander Yunbi as they approached the Thrakari formation. The bridge of the Retribution looked normal enough, but Minho had noticed that some of the control panels showed readings that made no sense according to conventional physics. "Admiral," Yunbi said quietly, "I want you to understand what you're about to see. The ships we're commanding today are not the same as the vessels in Earth's regular fleet. They operate using principles that our ancestors developed during the Silence Wars." "What kind of principles?" Minho asked. "The kind that allow matter to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously," Yunbi replied. "The kind that let us move through solid objects as if they weren't there. The kind that make our weapons ignore conventional defenses." On the main screen, they could see the Thrakari fleet growing larger as they approached. Velthar's ships were arranged in a defensive formation around the captured Indomitable, with the heaviest vessels forming an outer shell of protection. Incoming transmission from the Thrakari flagship, the communication officer reported. "Put it through," Yunbi ordered. War Commander Velthar's scarred face appeared on the screen. He looked confident, almost pleased to see them. "Human vessels," he said. "I am War Commander Velthar. I assume you have come to negotiate for the return of your ship and crew." "This is Fleet Commander Yunbi of Earth's Naval Forces," Yunbi replied, calmly. "I have come to offer you one chance to return what belongs to us. Release our ship and our people immediately, and you will be allowed to leave." Velthar laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the communication channel. "Commander, you have 12 ships. I have 47. Your vessel and crew are now property of the Thrakari Empire. If you wish to negotiate their release, you may contact our diplomatic corps." "I see," Yunbi said. "You refuse to return what you have stolen." "I refuse to surrender the only hope my people have for survival," Velthar replied. "Your technology will help us defeat the Zephyrians and save our species from extinction." Yunbi nodded slowly. "Then you have chosen your path. Admiral Minho, please open a channel to all Thrakari vessels." Minho activated the wideband communication system. Yunbi's voice would now be heard on every ship in the enemy fleet. "Attention Thrakari forces," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You have 1 minute to abandon your ships and retreat to minimum safe distance. Any vessel that remains in formation will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." The communication channel erupted with laughter from dozens of Thrakari voices. The idea that 12 human ships could threaten their entire fleet seemed absurd to them. Aboard the captured Indomitable, Captain Jaiwan sat in her cell with her crew, listening to the exchange over the ship's internal communication system. Tactical. Officer Donghyun looked puzzled. "Captain," he whispered, 12 ships against their entire fleet? How are we going to get out of this?" Jiwon smiled and began counting down from 10. 9, 8, 7. "What are you doing?" Engineer Sora asked. "Counting down to the moment when our rescuers stop pretending to be a normal fleet," Jiwon replied. 3, 2, 1, 0. The moment she reached 0, reality around the Thrakari fleet seemed to shift and bend. The 12 human ships suddenly became visible in dozens of different locations at once, as if they existed in multiple places, simultaneously. Then, without any apparent movement, they were simply inside the Thrakari defensive formation. "What?" War Commander Velthar stared at his tactical display in confusion. His sensors showed the human ships surrounding his fleet, but that was impossible. They had been kilometers away just seconds ago. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, his voice shaking. "The human vessels. They appear to have phased through our defensive line. Our sensors show them occupying the same space as our own ships, but there are no collisions." Velthar watched in growing horror as the human vessels opened fire. But these were not conventional weapons. The energy beams passed through his ships, shields as if they weren't there, striking directly at the hulls beneath. Worse, the damage appeared to be spreading in ways that defied all known physics. "Shields are useless," his tactical officer reported. "Their weapons are ignoring our defensive systems entirely." The Thrakari ships tried to return fire, but their weapons passed harmlessly through the human vessels. It was as if the enemy ships existed in a different dimension, able to affect the Thrakari fleet but immune to retaliation. One by one, Thrakari vessels began to explode as the impossible human weapons found their targets. But these were not normal explosions. The ships didn't just break apart, they seemed to unravel, their very atoms coming undone in patterns that hurt to look at. "Commander!" the sensor operator cried out. "We've lost 15 ships! Their weapons are—" "Sir, I don't understand what their weapons are doing." Velthar could see for himself. Where his ships had been destroyed, there was not the usual debris field of broken metal and escaping atmosphere. Instead, there was simply empty space, as if the vessels had never existed at all. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the battle with a mixture of awe and horror. The Thrakari fleet was being systematically dismantled by weapons that operated outside the normal laws of physics. Ships phase shifted through solid matter, weapons ignored energy shields, and the very fabric of space-time seemed to bend around. "The human vessels. Fleet Commander," he said quietly, "what exactly are we doing to them?" "We're demonstrating why the ancient agreements exist," Yunbi replied without taking her eyes off the tactical display. "The weapons we're using don't just destroy matter. They convince reality that the target never existed in the first place." "That's impossible," Minho said. "According to the physics you learned in school, yes," Yunbi agreed. "But during the silence, wars, humanity learned how to manipulate the fundamental forces that hold the universe together. We learned how to edit reality itself." On the Thrakari flagship, War Commander Velthar realized that he had made a terrible mistake. His fleet was being destroyed by forces he could not understand or fight against. Half of his ships were already gone, simply erased from existence by weapons that should not be possible. "All ships, retreat," he ordered. "Full speed, get us away from those vessels." But it was too late. The human ships moved through space in ways that ignored the normal limits of acceleration and inertia. They appeared around the fleeing Thrakari, vessels like ghosts, their weapons reaching out to touch reality and convince it to forget that enemy ships had ever existed. Within minutes, only a handful of Thrakari vessels remained. Velthar's flagship was one of them, but only because the humans had chosen to spare it. The Indomitable hung nearby, undamaged despite being in the middle of the battle zone. "Thrakari flagship," Fleet Commander Yunbi's voice came over the communication channel. "Prepare to transfer our people back to their ship. You will then withdraw from this system and never return." Velthar looked around at the empty space where his fleet had been. 42 ships and thousands of trained soldiers, all gone as if they had never existed. His hands shook as he gave the order to release the human prisoners. "This is not over," he said when the communication channel opened again. "Yes," Yunbi replied. "It is. You wanted to see what human technology could do, Commander. Now you know. Tell your people what you have learned here today. Tell them why the ancient warnings exist." Captain G1 and her crew were transferred back to the Indomitable without incident. As soon as they were aboard their own ship, Engineer Sora began running diagnostics on all systems. "Captain," she reported, "the Thrakari didn't manage to access any of our critical systems. The security protocols held." "Good," Jiwan replied. She opened a channel to Admiral Minho's ship. "Admiral, this is Captain G1. Thank you for the rescue, but I have to ask, what exactly did you do to the Thrakari fleet?" Minho's voice came back sounding tired and disturbed. "Captain, I'm not entirely sure I understand it myself, but I think we just reminded the galaxy why some rules should never be broken." As the human fleet prepared to leave the system, War Commander. In the days following the destruction of his fleet, War Commander Velthar retreated to the fortress world of Kithara, the last stronghold of the Thrakari Empire. The planet was protected by massive energy shields and defended by the most powerful weapons his people had ever built. If any place could keep him safe from the humans, it would be here. But safety was an illusion. As Velthar would soon learn, the rescue of the Indomitable had been only the beginning of humanity's response. What followed was not war in any conventional sense. It was something far more systematic and terrible, deep in the hidden bases beneath. Earth's moon, Fleet Commander Yunbi stood before a massive holographic display showing the entire galaxy. Red markers indicated every Thrakari military installation, every fleet base, every weapons facility that had played any role in the attack. On the human ship, "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. Around her, technicians worked at control panels that interfaced with systems beyond normal human understanding. Ships that existed partially outside reality began to move through dimensions that had no names in any language. The Gray Fleet was going hunting. Captain Seung-min commanded one of these vessels, the Inevitability. His ship looked like a normal human destroyer to casual observation, but appearances were deceiving. The Inevitability could travel through folded space-time, exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and carry weapons that operated on principles that conventional science insisted were impossible. "Captain," his navigator reported, "we're approaching the Thrakari supply depot at Velkaran Station. The facility appears to be heavily defended." Seung-min studied the tactical display. The station was indeed well protected, with dozens of defensive platforms and a small fleet of guard ships. Under normal circumstances, attacking such a target would require a significant military force. "Signal the station," Seung-min ordered. "Give them the standard warning." The communication officer opened a channel to Velkaran Station. "Thrakari Facility. This is Captain Seung-min of the Earth vessel Inevitability. You have one opportunity to evacuate all personnel from your station. You have 30 minutes. The response came back immediately, filled with anger and defiance. "Human vessel, this is Commander Thakris of Velkaran Station. You are outnumbered 50-1. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Seung-min almost felt sorry for the Thrakari commander. The alien had no way of understanding what he was facing. 29 minutes and counting, Seung-min replied calmly. On the station, Commander Thakris watched his sensors as the single human ship held position just outside weapons range. He had heard rumors about what had happened to War Commander Velthar's fleet, but he found them hard to believe. How could 12 ships destroy 47 vessels without taking any damage in return? "Sir," his tactical officer said, "should we open fire?" "Not yet," Thakris replied. "Let them make the first move. I want to see what these humans can actually do." He would soon get his wish, though not in the way he expected. 29 minutes later, the Inevitability began its attack. But instead of moving toward the station, the ship seemed to simply fade from normal space. For a moment, Thakris thought it had retreated. Then the station's defensive platforms began to explode. "What's happening?" Thakris demanded, staring at his tactical display in confusion. "Sir, the platforms are being destroyed, but I can't detect any weapons fire. It's as if they're just coming apart." Through the viewing windows of the command center, Thakris could see the defensive platforms breaking apart in impossible ways. They didn't explode like normal damaged equipment. Instead, they seemed to unravel, their very atoms separating and drifting away into space. "Where is the human ship?" he asked. I don't know, sir. Our sensors can't locate it," What the Thrakari couldn't see was that the inevitability was moving through dimensions that their technology couldn't detect. The ship existed in normal space just long enough to fire its weapons, then shifted back into folded reality where conventional sensors couldn't track it. Within minutes, all of the station's defenses were gone. The guard ships tried to flee, but they suffered the same fate as the defensive platforms. They simply came apart at the molecular level, their matter dispersing into space as if they had never been solid objects at all. "Attention, Velkaran Station," Captain Sungmin's voice came over the communication channel. "Your defenses have been neutralized. You now have 5 minutes to evacuate all personnel before we target the station itself." Commander Thakris looked around at his terrified crew. They had just watched their entire defensive fleet disappear without being able to fight back or even understand what was attacking them. "Begin evacuation procedures," he ordered quietly. "All personnel to the escape pods." Similar scenes were playing out across Thrakari space. Gray fleet vessels appeared at military installations like ghosts, gave evacuation warnings, then systematically erased any facility that had supported the attack on the Indomitable. The Thrakari military was being dismantled piece by piece. But the humans were careful. They targeted only military installations and gave civilians time to escape. This was not genocide or conquest. It was something more precise and more terrifying. The complete elimination of the Thrakari Empire's ability to wage war. Admiral Minho accompanied one of these missions, serving as an observer aboard the Gray Fleet vessel Omega Point. He watched in fascination and horror as the ship's captain, a quiet woman named Yeren, calmly directed the destruction of a major Thrakari fleet base. "Captain," Minho asked, "how are we doing this?" "Our weapons are acting like they ignore the normal laws of physics." Yeren looked up from her command console. "Admiral, during the Silence Wars, humanity learned that reality is more flexible than most people believe. What we call the laws of physics are really just suggestions that can be overruled if you know how." "That sounds like magic, not science," Minho said. "The difference between advanced science and magic is mostly a matter of perspective," Yeren replied. "Our ancestors discovered that consciousness can directly influence quantum reality. With the right technology and training, you can convince the universe to change its mind about what's possible." On the main screen, they watched as a massive Thrakari battleship simply faded from existence. One moment it was there, bristling with weapons and armor. The next moment, there was only empty space. "We don't destroy these ships," Yeren explained. "We edit them out of reality. We convince the universe that they never existed in the first place." Meanwhile, on Cathara, War Commander Velthar received report after report of military facilities being eliminated. In 3 days, the humans had erased over 60% of his empire's military infrastructure. Weapons factories, shipyards, training centers, fleet bases, all gone, as if they had never existed. "Sir," his aide reported, "we've lost contact with the 7th Fleet. Last transmission indicated they were under attack by a single human vessel." Velthar closed his eyes. The 7th Fleet had consisted of 24 ships, including some of the most powerful vessels in the Thrakari military. If a single human ship could eliminate an entire fleet, then nowhere in his empire was truly safe. "What about the Zephyrians?" he asked. "Are they taking advantage of our weakness?" "Strangely, no, sir. The Zephyrian advance has stopped completely. Our intelligence suggests they're afraid to move into territory where human ships might be operating. That was perhaps the most disturbing news of all. The Zephyrians were ruthless conquerors who had never shown fear of any enemy. If they were avoiding Thrakari space because of the human presence, then the galaxy's understanding of human capabilities had been completely wrong. Back on Earth, Director Hyunwoo monitored the systematic dismantling of the Thrakari military machine. Reports came in every few hours from Grey Fleet vessels across the galaxy. Installation after installation was being eliminated with mechanical precision. "Sir," his assistant Minji said, "we're receiving requests for clarification from several galactic governments. They want to know what our intentions are regarding the Thrakari Empire." "Tell them we have no territorial ambitions regarding Thrakari space," Hyunwoo replied. "We are simply ensuring that the violation of Earth's fleet never happens again." "What about the Thrakari civilians?" "They will be protected. Once their military capability is eliminated, we will work with other galactic powers to ensure humanitarian aid reaches their remaining populations." It was a strange kind of mercy. The humans were destroying the Thrakari Empire's ability to wage war while simultaneously protecting its people from the consequences. It demonstrated a level of control and precision that made other galactic powers deeply uncomfortable. Captain Sungmin stood on the bridge of the inevitability as his ship approached another target. This time it was a research facility where Thrakari scientists had been developing new weapons technologies. Like all the others, it would be given a chance to evacuate before being erased from existence. Captain, his communications officer, said, "The facility is requesting a meeting with our diplomatic representatives. They want to negotiate." "There's nothing to negotiate," Sungmin replied. They participated in the fortress world of Kithara hung in space like a dark jewel, surrounded by the most powerful defensive systems the Thrakari Empire had ever built. Massive energy shields protected the planet from orbital bombardment, while thousands of defensive platforms and automated weapon systems created an impenetrable barrier around the world. It was here that War Commander Velthar had made his final retreat, gathering the last remnants of his military forces for what he knew would be their final battle. In the week since the human hunting fleets had begun their systematic destruction of Thrakari military assets, over 90% of the Empire's war-making capability had simply vanished. Not destroyed in conventional battles, but erased from existence as if they had never been built. Entire fleets had disappeared without leaving so much as debris behind. Velthar stood in the command center of Kithara's planetary defense grid, surrounded by the most advanced technology his people possessed. Through the massive viewing screens, he could see his remaining fleet arranged in defensive formations around the planet. 200 ships, including several massive dreadnoughts that represented the pinnacle of Thrakari engineering. It was all that remained of what had once been the fourth largest military force in the galaxy. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "long-range sensors are detecting a single contact approaching the system. Configuration matches human vessel signatures." Velthar almost laughed at the absurdity of it. One ship, after everything he had witnessed, after watching the humans erase installation after installation with impossible ease, they were sending a single vessel to face his final stronghold. "Identification?" he asked. "The vessel identifies itself as the EFS Retribution, flagship, of Admiral Minho." Velthar remembered Admiral Minho from the Galactic Council meeting that seemed like a lifetime ago. The human officer had tried to warn him, had pleaded with him not to attack Earth's fleet. Now, he was coming to deliver the final consequences of Velthar's decision. Aboard the Retribution, Admiral Minho stood beside Fleet Commander Yunbi as they approached the Kithara system. The ship's sensors showed the impressive array of defenses that protected the Thrakari homeworld, but Minho had learned not to be impressed by conventional military displays. "Fleet Commander," he said, "are you planning to destroy all of those defenses the same way we've been eliminating their other installations?" Yunbi studied the tactical display with the calm expression of someone who had seen far worse things than planetary defense grids. "Admiral, this is different. Cathara is not just a military installation. It's their last refuge, the place where their remaining civilian population has gathered. We cannot simply erase it from existence." "Then how do we proceed?" "We give War Commander Velthar one final chance to surrender," Yunbi replied. "If he refuses, we demonstrate why resistance is futile." The Retribution entered the Cathara system and took up position just outside the range of the planetary defenses. Almost immediately, communication requests began flooding in from the Thrakari fleet. "Put me through to their commander," Minho ordered. War Commander Velthar's image appeared on the main screen. The Thrakari leader looked older than Minho remembered, his scales dulled with exhaustion and stress. But his eyes still burned with the desperate determination of a cornered predator. "Admiral Minho," Velthar said, "I assume you have come to demand my surrender." "I have come to offer you a choice," Minho replied. "Stand down your defenses and order your remaining fleet to disperse. In exchange, your people will be relocated to worlds where they can live in peace under galactic protection." "And if I refuse?" Fleet Commander Yunbi stepped into view of the communication pickup. "Then you and your forces will be removed from existence, just like all the others. The difference is that this time you'll have the opportunity to witness it personally." Velthar's claws scraped against the metal of his command console. "You expect me to simply surrender the last stronghold of my people? To abandon everything we have built?" "We expect you to accept reality," Yunbi said calmly. "Your military forces are already defeated. Your empire is finished. The only question remaining is whether you choose to end this with dignity or force us to demonstrate why resistance is pointless." "I have seen what your weapons can do," Velthar replied. "But Cathara is protected by shields that can withstand the firepower of an entire fleet. Our defensive systems are the most advanced in the galaxy." "War Commander," Minho said sadly, "you still don't understand. Our weapons don't attack your shields. They don't need to overcome your defenses. They simply convince reality that your defenses were never there." Velthar cut the communication channel and turned to his staff. Around him, Thrakari officers waited for orders, their faces showing the strain of weeks of systematic defeat. "All fleet units, assume attack formation," he ordered. "Planetary defenses power to maximum. We may not be able to win, but we will show these humans that the Thrakari do not surrender." It was exactly the response that Fleet Commander Yunbi had expected. She had seen this pattern many times during the Silence Wars, desperate commanders, who could not accept the reality of their situation, who chose to fight rather than face the magnitude of their defeat. "Begin the demonstration," she ordered. The Retribution began to change. Admiral Minho watched in fascination as sections of the ship's hull seemed to phase in and out of normal space-time. The vessel was shifting between dimensions, existing partially in normal reality and partially in spaces that had no names in any conventional language. On Cathara, War Commander Velthar watched his sensors as the human ship simply vanished from normal space. For a moment, he thought it had retreated. Then, his outer defense ring began to disappear. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "we're losing contact with Defense Platform Alpha 7. Weapons malfunction? Velthar asked. No, sir. The platform is gone. Not destroyed, not damaged. It's simply not there anymore. Through the viewing screens, Velthar could see the impossible truth with his own eyes. Defense platforms that had taken years to build and position were simply fading from existence. One moment they were there, bristling with weapons and shields. The next moment there was only empty space. Sir, Alpha 9 is gone. Alpha 12 is disappearing now. The elimination of the defense platforms followed no pattern that Thrakari tactics could understand. The human ship was nowhere to be seen, but its weapons were somehow reaching through dimensions to touch targets that should have been protected by layers of shields and armor. All fleet units, open fire on the last known position of the human. Vessel, Velthar ordered desperately. 200 Thrakari warships opened fire simultaneously, filling space with energy beams and missile salvos. For a few seconds, the area around the Retribution's last position was brighter than a small star. When the light faded, there was nothing there. No debris, no energy signatures, no trace that anything had ever existed in that location. Target. Destroyed? Velthar asked hopefully. Negative, sir. The human vessel is... Sir? It's directly above the planet. How did it get through the shields? Velthar looked up at the tactical display and felt his heart stop beating. The Retribution was indeed directly above Kithara, well inside the planetary defense perimeter. It had somehow passed through shields and defense grids without triggering any alarms or defensive responses. All planetary weapons, target the human ship and fire, he ordered. The surface of Kithara erupted with light as hundreds of massive defensive weapons targeted the single human vessel. Energy beams capable of destroying battleships focused on the Retribution, creating a concentration of firepower that should have vaporized any ship ever built. The beams passed harmlessly through the human vessel as if it were made of empty space. Impossible, Velthar whispered. Aboard the Retribution, Admiral Minho watched the Thrakari weapons fire through his ship without effect. The vessel existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, allowing it to interact with normal space when it chose to while remaining immune to conventional attacks. Fleet Commander, he said, this seems excessive. We've made our point. Have we? Yunbi asked. She activated the ship's communication system. War Commander Velthar, do you see now why resistance is futile? Your most powerful weapons cannot even touch us. Your strongest defenses might as well be made of paper. On Kithara's surface, Velthar received the transmission in his command bunker. Around him, status displays showed that over half of his orbital defenses had simply ceased to exist. His fleet was powerless to attack an enemy that existed partially outside normal reality. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice hollow with defeat. We want you to understand, Yunbi replied. The ancient agreements exist for a reason. When you attacked our ship, you triggered protocols that have been in place for over 1,000 years. Your empire's military capability will be completely eliminated. That is not negotiable. And my people? Your civilian population will be protected and relocated. They bear no responsibility for your decisions. Velthar looked around at his officers, seeing his own defeat reflected in their expressions. Everything he had built, everything his people had achieved, was being swept away by forces he could not fight or even understand. In the days following the surrender of Kithara, an unusual quiet settled over the galaxy. The systematic elimination of the Thrakari Empire's military forces had been completed with a precision that left other species deeply unsettled. What had once been the fourth largest military power in known space, had simply ceased to exist, not through conquest or destruction, but through something far more disturbing: selective editing of reality itself. Ambassador Yuna stood before the Galactic Council once again, but this time the great chamber was filled with a different kind of tension. The representatives who had laughed at her warnings just weeks ago now sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had witnessed. "Fellow beings," Yuna began, her ancient voice carrying the weight of inevitable truth, "we have all seen the consequence of violating the ancient agreements. The Thrakari Empire challenged Earth's fleet, and now that empire no longer exists as a military power. The Zephyrian representative, a massive insectoid creature called Queen Voice Zakth, clicked her mandibles nervously. The Horde has observed the human response to Thrakari aggression. We find it educational." That was perhaps the most remarkable development of all. The Zephyrian Horde, which had been systematically conquering Thrakari space for months, had completely halted their advance the moment human ships appeared in the region. An entire invasion had simply stopped because the Zephyrians were afraid to enter areas where Earth vessels might be operating. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our understanding," the representative from the Silicon Consortium said, his crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights in patterns that indicated deep concern. "Ships that exist in multiple dimensions, weapons that edit reality. These technologies suggest a level of advancement that makes the rest of us appear primitive." Admiral Minho sat in the human delegation area, still processing everything he had witnessed during the systematic dismantling of the Thrakari military. He had seen weapons that convinced matter to stop existing, ships that moved through dimensions that had no names, and defensive systems that made conventional physics look like suggestions rather than laws. "Representatives," he said, standing to address the assembly, "I want to be clear about something. What you witnessed was not the full extent of human capabilities. It was a measured response designed to eliminate a specific threat while minimizing collateral damage." The chamber fell completely silent. If what they had seen was a restrained response, then the true extent of human power was beyond imagination. Fleet Commander Yunbi had returned to the hidden bases beneath Earth's moon, where she oversaw the systematic shutdown of systems that had not been active for decades. The Gray Fleet was returning to its dimensional hiding places, the ancient weapons were being locked away again, and the universe was being allowed to return to a state where conventional physics applied to human activities. "Director," she said to Hyunwoo as they watched the massive displays showing the fleet's withdrawal, "the operation is complete. All Thrakari military assets have been eliminated. Their civilian population is being relocated under galactic protection." Hyunwoo nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "What about the other species? How are they reacting to what they've seen?" "Exactly as expected," Yunbi replied. "Fear, confusion, and a new level of respect for human space. Several governments have already sent diplomatic messages requesting clarification of our territorial boundaries and defensive policies. Are they afraid we'll expand our operations? They're afraid they might accidentally trigger the same response the Thrakari did. No one wants to be the next species to discover what happens when you violate the ancient agreements." On the former Thrakari world of Velsharma, Captain Jiwon walked through refugee camps where thousands of displaced civilians were being processed for relocation to new homes. The Galactic Council had mobilized massive humanitarian efforts to help the Thrakari population, but the scale of the displacement was enormous. A young Thrakari female approached her, speaking in heavily accented galactic standard. "You are human military, yes? From the ships that made our fleets disappear?" Jiwan knelt down to the child's level. "I am Captain Jiwan of the Earth Fleet. What's your name?" "I am Silath," the child replied. "My parent was soldier in my war commander's fleet. He is gone now. Not dead. Just not there anymore." It was perhaps the most difficult part of the entire operation. The humans had been precise in their targeting, eliminating only military assets and personnel who had directly participated in the attack on the Indomitable. But that precision had created a unique kind of grief. Families who had lost members not to death, but to complete erasure from existence. "I'm sorry for what happened to your parent," Jiwan said gently. "The Council is working to find good homes for all of you. You'll be safe, and you'll be cared for." "Why did the humans do this?" Silath asked. "War Commander said you were weak. That taking your ship would help us fight the bug people." Jiwan considered how to explain something that even adult humans found difficult to understand. "Sometimes, Silath, the strongest people are the ones who choose not to show their strength. But when someone forces them to show it, the result can be overwhelming." Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the last few Thrakari military installations were being processed by Grey Fleet vessels. These were not combat operations anymore. They were more like cleanup activities, ensuring that no military assets had been overlooked during the main campaign. Captain Sungmin of the Inevitability was conducting one of these final sweeps when his ship detected an automated defense platform that had somehow escaped the initial purge. It was a small installation, barely more than a weapons platform with a simple artificial intelligence. "Captain," his communication officer reported, "the platform is transmitting a surrender signal. Its AI seems to understand what's happening." Sungmin studied the tactical display. The platform posed no real threat. It was too small and too lightly armed to endanger any Earth vessel. But the protocols were clear. All Thrakari military assets were to be eliminated. "Signal the platform," he ordered. "Inform it that it has 30 seconds to shut down all systems and eject any organic crew members." "Sir, scans indicate no life. Forms aboard. It's fully automated." "Then give it 10 seconds to shut down and prepare for elimination." The platform's AI responded immediately, powering down all weapons and sending a final transmission. "This unit acknowledges the authority of Earth Fleet. This unit surrenders all military functions. This unit requests mercy." It was a strange moment. An artificial intelligence, faced with certain elimination, asking for something that might not even apply to electronic consciousnesses. Sungmin made a decision that would later be debated by military historians. "Platform AI, you are ordered to delete all military programming and weapon control systems. Retain only basic maintenance and communication functions. You will serve as a navigation beacon for civilian traffic in this sector." "Acknowledged, Earth vessel. This unit complies." "This unit thanks you." The platform's weapon systems went dark. Its military programming deleted itself, and what remained was transformed into a simple navigation aid. It was perhaps the only piece of Thrakari military hardware to survive the purge, preserved not through resistance, but through acceptance and adaptation. Back on Earth, news of the Thrakari operation was carefully managed. The general human population knew that their fleet had successfully rescued the crew of the Indomitable and had conducted military operations against the attackers. But the full details of what the Grey Fleet had done and the true extent of human technological capabilities remained classified. Engineer Sora, who had witnessed the first Grey Fleet demonstration during the rescue operation, found herself assigned to a special briefing unit that was responsible for documenting the events for future reference. "The important thing," she wrote in her official report, "is not what we did to the Thrakari Empire. The important thing is what we demonstrated to the galaxy. Every species now understands that there are consequences for violating certain fundamental laws. They understand that Earth's fleet operates under protections that exist for very good reasons. The galaxy had indeed learned that lesson. In the months following the Thrakari incident, there was a marked decrease in piracy, territorial disputes, and military aggression throughout known space. No one wanted to accidentally trigger the kind of response that had eliminated an entire empire's military capacity. The Zephyrian horde, faced with the sudden disappearance of their primary enemy and the presence of human observers in former Thrakari space, began diplomatic negotiations for the first time in their species' recorded history. The Silicon Consortium quietly shelved several aggressive expansion plans. Even the most warlike species began reviewing their policies regarding human vessels and territory. Admiral Minho returned to his regular duties, but he found that his perspective on galactic politics had changed completely. He now understood that humanity's role in the galaxy was not that of newcomers learning from older, more experienced species. Instead, humans served as guardians of a peace that had been purchased with terrible knowledge. 1 year had passed since the Thrakari incident, and the galaxy had settled into what historians would later call the Long Peace. Trade flourished along routes that had once been plagued by piracy and territorial disputes. Diplomatic solutions replaced military confrontations with remarkable frequency. And throughout it all, Earth's patrol ships continued their quiet monitoring of the Outer Rim territories, their presence alone enough to prevent conflicts that might otherwise have escalated beyond control. Admiral Minho stood in the conference room of the orbital station that served as headquarters for the Galactic Trade Commission, looking out at a view that would have been impossible just 2 years ago. Ships from dozens of species moved peacefully through the shipping lanes, their crews cooperating with a level of harmony that had never existed in recorded galactic history. "Admiral," the station commander said, approaching with a data pad full of reports, "the quarterly piracy statistics have come in. We've had exactly 7 incidents of unlawful ship seizure in the past 3 months, compared to over 300 in the same period last year." Minho nodded, unsurprised by the numbers. "Any of those incidents involve attempts to attack human vessels?" "None, sir. In fact, when pirates scan for human fleet signatures, they typically abandon whatever operation they were planning and leave the area immediately. It was the same pattern throughout the galaxy. The mere possibility that human ships might be operating in an area was enough to discourage aggressive action. No one wanted to accidentally trigger another demonstration of Earth's true capabilities. Captain Jiwon commanded a new patrol route that took her through some of the most volatile regions of galactic space. Her ship, the EFS Harmony, was officially tasked with monitoring trade routes and providing assistance to civilian vessels. In practice, her presence served as a guarantee that no major conflicts would develop in the sectors she patrolled. "Captain," her new tactical officer reported, "we're receiving a distress signal from a merchant convoy in the Velkara system. They report being surrounded by raiders from the Crimson Brotherhood." Jiwon sighed. The Crimson Brotherhood was one of the few pirate organizations that hadn't learned the new rules yet. They still believed they could operate using the old methods of intimidation and violence. "Set course for Velkara," she ordered. Standard approach speed. No need to rush. By the time the Harmony arrived at the convoy's location, the situation had already resolved itself. The moment the pirates had detected an incoming human vessel, they had abandoned their attack and fled to deep space. The merchant ships were unharmed and continuing on their planned route. "Captain," the convoy leader transmitted, "thank you for your response. Though I have to say, you didn't need to fire a shot." "We rarely do," Ji-Wan replied. "Safe travels, convoy leader." It was becoming the standard pattern for human patrol operations. Their ships didn't fight battles anymore. They prevented them simply by existing in the right place at the right time. Meanwhile, on the former Thrakari world of New Velsharma, the relocated civilian population was adapting to life under the protection of the Galactic Council. The world was peaceful and prosperous, with advanced agricultural systems and comfortable living conditions provided by a coalition of species who were eager to demonstrate their humanitarian values. Silith, now a young adult, worked as a translator and cultural liaison between the Thrakari refugees and their new neighbors. She had learned multiple galactic languages and developed a deep understanding of interspecies diplomacy. Her own experience as a child refugee had given her unique insights into the challenges of building new communities after devastating loss. "The important thing," she would tell new refugees, "is to remember that the humans could have eliminated our entire species. They chose not to. They chose to punish only those who made the decision to attack their ship and to protect the rest of us. That tells us something important about who they really are." The Thrakari refugees had become something of a symbol throughout the galaxy, living proof that even in their overwhelming response to aggression, humans maintained ethical boundaries. It was a message that resonated strongly with species who had spent years fearing that technological superiority inevitably led to domination and oppression. Fleet Commander Yunbi had returned to her role as commander of the Grey Fleet, overseeing the vessels and systems that officially did not exist. But the nature of her duties had changed significantly. Where once the Grey Fleet had been a purely military force, it now served more as a deterrent and emergency response system. "Director," she said to Hyunwoo during one of their regular briefings, "we're receiving requests from 17 different species asking for clarification on what constitutes an attack on Earth vessels. They want to make sure their standard patrol activities don't accidentally trigger our defensive protocols." Hyunwoo smiled at the irony. "A year ago, most of those species considered us primitive newcomers who needed their guidance. Now they're asking us to define the rules of galactic engagement." "Fear is a powerful teacher," Yunbi replied. "They've learned that our definition of attack is very broad, and our response to such attacks is very thorough. The requests for clarification had led to the establishment of new diplomatic protocols that formalized what had previously been unwritten rules. The Earth Accords, as they came to be known, laid out clear guidelines for interaction with human vessels and territory. The rules were simple: approach peacefully, request permission before conducting any activities near human ships, and never attempt to board, capture, or attack Earth vessels under any circumstances. Every major galactic power had signed the accords within months of their publication. No one wanted to risk misunderstanding the boundaries. Engineer Sora had been promoted to Chief Technical Advisor for Interspecies Relations, a position that had been created specifically to help other species understand human technology without revealing its true nature. It was a delicate balance, providing enough information to prevent accidents while maintaining the secrecy that protected both humanity and the galaxy from the consequences of widespread knowledge about dimensional manipulation technology. The key, she explained to a gathering of galactic scientists, is to understand that human technology operates on principles that are non-standard. Our ships may not respond to conventional sensor scans in expected ways. Our weapons may appear to function outside normal physical parameters. This is not a threat to peaceful vessels, but it does mean that standard military analysis techniques may produce confusing results. The scientists nodded politely, though Sora could see in their expressions that they understood more than they were willing to admit. The galaxy's brightest minds had spent months analyzing the limited data available from the Thrakari incident, and while they couldn't replicate human technology, they had developed theories about what they had witnessed. Theoretical physicists spoke quietly of dimensional phase weapons and reality manipulation fields. Military analysts developed new tactical doctrines based on the assumption that human ships could ignore conventional defensive measures, and philosophers debated the ethics of possessing power so vast that restraint became a moral imperative. Tactical Officer Dong Yun had accepted a teaching position at the Galactic Military Academy, where he instructed officers from multiple species on the new realities of interstellar conflict. His courses had waiting lists that stretched for years, as military leaders throughout the galaxy sought to understand how warfare had fundamentally changed. The old model of military thinking, he would tell his students, was based on the assumption that all species operated within the same technological and physical constraints. We built strategies around the idea that superior numbers, better weapons, or stronger defenses would determine the outcome of conflicts. He would pause to let that sink in before continuing. The Thrakari incident demonstrated that these assumptions are no longer valid. When one species possesses technology that operates outside conventional physics, traditional military thinking becomes obsolete. The new model must be based on preventing conflicts rather than winning them. His students, representing dozens of species and military traditions, would sit in thoughtful silence as they processed the implications. Everything they had learned about strategy and tactics had been rendered irrelevant by the demonstration of human capabilities. The most profound changes, however, were not in military doctrine or diplomatic protocol, but in the fundamental assumptions that governed galactic civilization. For millennia, the galaxy had operated on the principle that technological advancement was a gradual process, with species slowly developing new capabilities through research and experimentation. The revelation that humans possess technology from a lost age, technology so advanced that it could rewrite reality itself, had shattered that assumption. If one species could hide such capabilities for decades, what other secrets might be concealed throughout the galaxy? What other ancient powers might be watching and waiting from the shadows? Ambassador Yuna, despite her retirement, continued to serve as an